Right, it looks like we should be on air now. Welcome back to Nominate Podcast, to everyone who listens us. And if you don't, then I guess why? um, but you're listening to our international series where we support Ukraine and promote awareness about the war. And this episode, we focus on Russian information warfare and how to combat their disinformation and propaganda. And probably there is no better guest for this discussion than Bilyana Lilly, the author of recent book, Russian Information Warfare, Assault on Democracies in the Cyber Wild West. Dr. Lilly has over 15 years of experience in defense and cybersecurity. Currently, she is the head of geostrategic risk at the Krebs Tamos Group and an adjunct researcher at the RAND Corporation. Also, Dr. Lilly is a speaker at DefCon, CyCon, Executive Women's Forum, and the Warsaw Security Forum. She's also famously denounced by the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So, Dr. Lilly, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Ruslan. I'm really glad to be here and see you all.
Out of everyone, or rather, you have pretty impressive background, and but for Ukrainian audience, I think no matter how much credentials you would have, the ones that would catch the ear would still be the fact that you're denounced by the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So I guess we cannot not ask this question, and basically just wanted to figure out how that happened.
Yeah, so it's a great question. I've provoked a response from the Russian government several times with a lot of the things that I've been doing, and it's usually been out of my own curiosity, and I end up for research purposes in very interesting places. And once I was shoved by Yulia Shoigu, who is the daughter of the defense minister of Russia. This happened on another occasion. I was asked for my credential by a deputy defense minister of Russia. So I've had some experiences. On another occasion, there was a Russian soldier running after me, trying to confiscate my camera. So I've had a few of those moments. Particularly that denouncement was because I co-authored a paper with a really intelligent researcher called Joe Charavich, and hopefully at some point you'll have him on the show too, because Joe also writes about information warfare, and right now he's deeply buried in his dissertation, and it's going to be awesome because it's examining an aspect of that. And we wrote a paper about Russian cyber operations and how we can erode Russia's capacity to conduct cyber operations. And we published it and we talked about it. And a few days later, I got a note from a NATO friend who asked me to check Twitter. And we saw on Twitter that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has basically criticized our paper, said that it was not based on any facts. And there was even a meme of a bear, I think, hacking on a computer at a kitchen with a bowl of fruit next to it. It was really weird, but it was literally attached as a meme to our paper, and it was a quote from Maria Zakharova that was basically she denounced us. She said this is fake news.
Of course, yeah.
Not
this is all fake news.
Exactly. So I thanked her very respectfully, and that was it. And I still have to print this and put it somewhere, but this is one of those publicly known.
Absolutely, you could probably also come up with some merch.
Yeah, probably.
You're now leading response unit for geostrategic and business risk intelligence. So could you tell us a little bit more about your job duties there, and does it focus on Ukraine, or what is in the field of focus of it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So we're still growing. I'm working with a great team, and we're looking at whenever there's a company that's international, has either an international branch or an office somewhere outside of the United States, or it has assets that could be interesting to nation state threat actors. We look at the company and we say, okay, what are the cyber regulatory and geopolitical risks that are associated with your business? And how do you have to shape your strategy in the most effective way so that you minimize and mitigate the risks from these particular areas? So this is kind of the general description that I can give. And we work with a lot of companies, and Russia and Ukraine especially is a huge focus right now. We also produce a biweekly analytical digest. We call it a newsletter, and we send it to all of our clients, and it covers the current geopolitical landscape and cyber regulatory landscape. And whenever there's an issue, we send alerts as well, and they cover China, Ukraine, and other areas that are potential concern for clients. So yes, I'm the Russia watcher and Ukraine watcher, and that's why I don't sleep a lot these days. I don't think any of us that's paying attention to the conflict is sleeping a lot these days, because every day there's something new, and every day there's a trend that we're looking at, and it's almost like a matchbox, and you're waiting for it to like light up again. And it's
Yeah, it's like,
yep,
please
it's
stand by as
definitely
we
relevant.
try to make
Yeah,
this world a safer place.
yeah.
So in your book, you touch a lot of details on Russian cyber war on Russian cyber war, and in general, do you think that Russian informational operation cases in general, were they successful? Because we hear a lot about that throughout the years, 2016 and so on, but it's not really clear about impact and what were their goals. Like, did they reach their goals or not?
Such a great question, isn't it? We always talk about the Russians being 10 feet tall and, oh my God, they're coming and they're in our networks and we have to defend the elections and let's pour millions of dollars into that. But it's an awesome question, and I've tried to answer it from multiple angles. So for 2016, no one can still tell me for sure, did the Russians decide the elections? There are a lot of pundits that will argue either way, but you need to have a methodologically rigorous study that looks at are certain pieces of disinformation or strategic messaging that were released from the DNC hack in 2016, how did they affect voters' preferences and voters' willingness to vote, and then eventually the decision to go and vote? So there are so many like in betweens. Let's say I hear a piece of information about Hillary Clinton or another candidate that's basically compromising her in my eyes. Would this make me go and change my mind, or would this make me just more irritated towards that candidate, but I'll still vote for her because I'm a Democrat? So there are a lot of those intricacies that if I'm a methodologist and I did that sort of research back at Rand, like I wouldn't trust just statements. This is way too important to be delegated to statements and hypotheses. So we need a good study, and there are methods to do this with like randomized control trial, for example, and so on. And we can get geeky on those details. But basically the point is, I don't think anyone has done it so far to tell us. And when I look at effectiveness of information warfare operations, I look at what did the Russian government try to achieve. Let's start from there. And let's say in 2016, with the cyber operations, they tried a hack and leak. Was that successful when they hacked the Democratic National Committee? Yes. They got into the networks, they breached them, they successfully exfiltrated information, they released it through Guccifer 2.0, WikiLeaks, and DCLeaks. So that particular part of the information warfare campaign was successful. Then, did they decide the outcome of the elections? Unclear. No one can really tell you. But let's say, did they manage to rattle the Democratic campaign? Yes. The chairman of the DNC, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, I believe was her name, she resigned because of the DNC hack. A chairman of the entire DNC resigned because of that. So for me, this is a big success. And also the fact that we kept on talking about the Russians so much as the elections were taking place. And afterwards, we kept on hearing about the troll and bots, and we kept on hearing about rallies that they're sponsoring, and we kept on analyzing their behavior. For Putin, this is like success. I'm in the news. The Americans care about me. The American media covers me. Like I am a great power. So I think that was probably from the perspective of the Russians a huge success. But in other cases, let's see, one of the very first ones that's very kind of little clearer because we have more data on it. Let's say the DDoS attacks against Estonia in 2007. Remember, Estonia wanted to move on.
Could you maybe please stay with the DNC hack for a little bit longer?
Absolutely.
Because I wanted to ask you a specific question. Look, I think that the inability to decisively assess the effect on the election's outcome is due to two factors. So first of all, American democracy is very complicated, right? And the Ukrainian one is election system. I mean, is much more simple. We can decisively and absolutely concretely state that Russians affected our elections once or twice, right? Maybe not in cyber, but information, I mean, in the information field, certainly. And the second one is that, as many analysts state, maybe we should take their advice and assess Russian success by the measurement they make, right? So I don't think that they wanted to decisively affect the democratic processes. They wanted to distort them and use this distortion to discredit them globally, to just shake this inevitability of liberalism and democracy as the end of history, and say that, our way to govern has perspective too, because look what good democracy did them. Do
No,
you
you're
agree with
absolutely
that, or
right. Yeah,
maybe I'm
because
confused?
no, that's excellent point. When we analyze the disinformation narratives that they were spreading, they weren't, and the way they were stationing rallies, they weren't just supporting one candidate. They were supporting at different times both candidates, both the Republican and the Democrat. And also, so there are some narratives that say it's all hypothesis, right? We haven't looked at Putin's notebook to say, okay, under elections 2016, okay, these were his objectives, their ticks, they were achieved. Like, we don't have that notebook to say what exactly was in his head.
Or at least not yet.
Good point. Good point, Ruslan. Send me a
But
copy when you get it, okay?
but
please.
anyway, even if you don't see the plans, it's very in line with their general strategy of reflexive control. Polarize
Absolutely.
and distort, right?
Yep, reflexive control was during the Cold War, but right now in the information warfare concept, in the definition, if you guys ask me, I'm going to tell you about it because I've opened it here because it's important. In 2011, one of the points of why they do information warfare is to coerce the state into behaving the way they want, and it's exactly reflexive control in there.
So it's like it's indoctrinated. It's like doctrinal in the strategy.
Yep.
It's written.
2011. Yep, document. I can
Nice.
send you
I didn't know.
Yeah.
Cool.
See, for those of us who actually sit for the documents, yeah, it's right there. But
yeah,
you're absolutely right. And they were stationing rallies to support Hillary Clinton and to support Donald Trump even after the election, which is a huge point. And thank you for bringing it up, because people think, okay, they wanted to affect the elections and they moved on. No, the disinformation volume and the number of the rallies that they stationed that were trying to polarize the population still continued after the election took place. So my assessment of that is it's in line with their doctrine of information warfare, which says we want to disturb, basically to erode the democratic process, the decision-making process in your country. We want to erode your trust in your governance. So you're absolutely right. And it's codified and the data shows it.
Nice.
So yeah, I think you're right.
And from what we see, it looks like their cyber operations are usually in line with informational operations, right? It's the same thing for them, or usually like one is a part of another. Is that the case? Is that what you see as well from your studies? And which out of those two you think they are better at?
Also, that's a great question. So in some cases, I did see that there's some patterns and some integration between the two. In other cases, it was harder to see, but it may also be because I didn't look where I was supposed to, because of the data collection method that I used, because of the media that I decided to look for disinformation in. So I think that in general, they try to use them in coordination, or at least try to use them in a way that amplifies the achievement of their actual objective. Like in the DNC hack in 2016, what happened? They took the information out of the DNC. They tried first for Guccifer 2.0. It didn't pick up. They tried for DC Leaks. A lot of media didn't pick it up. And then finally they started releasing it for WikiLeaks. And then it finally, like, media started paying attention. People started paying attention. And then they took that information from the DNC leaks, and they integrated it with state-sponsored strategic messaging through RT and Sputnik. So it became a part of their other disinformation and strategic messaging. There was even, like, in the book, I look at the portion that was a part of the strategic messaging that talked about the GNC versus everything else that they talked about in relation to the election. So it became a part of their general disinformation / strategic messaging campaign. In other cases, like in Estonia in 2007, they initiated, if you remember, 4 waves of DDoS attacks against Estonia because of the drone soldier. And when I looked at all the volume of media that was targeted, that was available to the Ukrainians and was state-sponsored from the Russians, you see there were 4 beautiful spikes in media coverage in the volume of media that was negative towards Ukraine just before each of the DDoS attacks. So it's like four beautiful spikes just before each of the DDoS attacks. So to me, this suggests there is some sort of coordination between, okay, we get angry, we express our indignation towards the particular state and what they're doing. We try maybe to even rally the hackers to help us with the DDoS attacks, and then we initiate the DDoS attack. And again, less information, disinformation, strategic messaging, and again, spike and a DDoS, spike and a DDoS. So this was a pattern that I saw, and I wonder if we look at some of the volume of messaging in Ukraine through maybe Telegram or Twitter or anything else, or any other states at this point, probably will be Telegram or Twitter, and we try to map that to certain cyber operations if we're going to see a pattern.
So do you think this like... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, nice. All 3 together. Alex, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just like was thinking aloud, right? Like whether you looked deeper, are those only spikes, or did you see like, change of narrative, or, like they're trying different strategies with these like media spikes, right?
So I actually read those articles. There are hundreds of articles around this time, all about the brown soldier. And when the spikes happened, it was the number of articles that they would publish about how, if you remember, the Russian government said the brown soldier was taken to pieces. It was actually damaged during the transportation process. So this was the piece of disinformation that was in the narrative, and they would emphasize that before the DDoS attacks. And they will claim again, the Ukrainians are desecrating our history, they're disrespecting us. So it's always negative rhetoric towards Ukraine, not Ukraine, I apologize, Estonia that spiked in those cases. So it's the negative rhetoric volume increase just before the DDoS attacks.
Alex, if you're done, I wanted to ask an expert on a specific question, and finally we got a specific expert on. So more in general, what do you think is the reason Russia treats information confrontation, or whatever translation for информационное противостояние is, right? Why do they institutionalize it on the doctrinal level as a spectrum of a coherent domain, and not put it differently as the Westerners do? Because it always was quite, maybe I'm a follower of Western school of thought in cyber, so that's why it's surprising me. Maybe the other way around is more natural, as a natural evolution of intangible warfare, right? So first some radio, then some SIGINT, and then some information distortion on a broader scale, just medium changes, and everything else remains pretty much the same. What do you think is the reason they evolutionized until now in this form, not the other way around?
Yeah, it's a great question, Vlad. I think it's cultural and historic, and I think they have seen the effectiveness of that integration of the two during the Cold War and now. And also, if you look at their units, the military units that are conducting this sort of warfare, and it's информационное противоборство, информационная война, информационная борьба. There's several terms, and I usually go with either information war, information warfare for the rough translation, and in different documents they call it slightly differently. So I would say, if you look at the GRU, they also have a history of using propaganda and psyops, and now they're really integrating them nicely with operations in cyberspace. So they have the know-how of how to do it, and they're building on it, and they're seeing that it's effective. And I think from a bureaucratic, historical, institutional, and cultural perspective, they see a lot of value in this. I still remember, I grew up in Bulgaria, and I remember we had so many pamphlets from the communist period, and my grandparents, they're still very they love Russia. My father is still very pro-Russian. I started working for NATO, and I'll come home and he'll tell me that everything evil comes from the West, and it's my father. And he grew up in the communist system, and he believes that Mother Russia liberated us, and that's why they own our lives. And this was all propaganda during that period. He also believes that COVID didn't happen. So you see the pernicious effects of following a narrative or looking at state-sponsored
What
media.
didn't happen?
The COVID, there are certain
COVID
individuals
didn't
that
happen?
believe, yes, that COVID was designed by a malicious government. I'm not sure at this point which one is the one that we're blaming.
Nice.
It depends on
yeah,
who you
COVID
ask.
Exactly.
Did you see this surveys from Germany where there is a direct correlation between people who believed in the COVID conspiracy a couple of years ago and who believed that Ukraine should go and shoot itself in the head and comply to whatever, concede to whatever Russians' demands are?
I wouldn't be surprised because it's very similar channels that are spreading those narratives. I would love to see that study if you can send me the link.
That's exactly what I wanted to hear, because I wanted to just confirm that they repurposed the troll farms they used in different periods.
Exactly.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm seeing that as well. Yeah.
Cool.
So send me the link. We'll exchange some information.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, definitely I will, because it's so clear to me.
Yeah, there are a lot of channels, and it's really interesting to see across different countries how Russian state-sponsored media coordinate sometimes their messages, and they're learning from each other. Especially in Eastern Europe, you have some in Montenegro, in Bulgaria, in Serbia, and you can see how there are certain experts that are also tracking this to see how to recognize the different elements in our media space that work for the Russian government or somehow related to the Russian government. And you can see how in parallel they start posting messages. So yes, these are very likely scenarios.
Interesting. And this is, I guess, a good point to ask, because your book was written before the full-scale invasion of Russia, and basically, I guess their operation was a little bit different before that. Did you observe if they changed any tactics since the invasion?
I mean, Ruslan, it's a war, right? They're doing a lot, and there's a lot to monitor. But I think from at least the way I have structured the models that I'm using or the frameworks that I'm using in my book, they can still capture the changes that we have seen. Like in one of the frameworks, I'm looking at mapping just the cyber operations during an information warfare operation. So we can map to those ransomware, wiper malware, DDoS attacks, anything that comes. But we've seen in Ukraine, a lot of active use of cyber operations. Victor Zhora recently said that it was about more than 1,600 significant cyber instances or cyber operations since the start of the war, and they're constant. So there is a lot to map and see. We've seen a lot of new versions of malware. We've seen Industroyer 2. So all of them are new. There are some interesting examples of how disinformation and cyber operations are also linked. So I would say all of this is giving us a lot more of an idea of Russia's capacity and how they conduct war and how they use information warfare during an actual war together with kinetic force, military force.
But would you say it's more of the same, or there are some?
Do they innovate?
Yeah.
Because certainly we have enjoyed a very interesting cycle of counter-innovation, because it just so happened that the Ukrainian president's administration is a bunch of PR wizards. That's basically how they came to power, right? So yeah, these people know their audience, and these people they love, and they know how to communicate. So do Russians continue this cycle of counter-innovation, or do they just do, as Ruslan said, more of the same?
So can we say that like hacking into Facebook accounts and then pretending to be leaders and spreading disinformation about Zelensky's innovation? I would say like they have done some of the activities that they have done, some of the operations I haven't seen before, but they continue to look for vulnerabilities and exploit whatever they can find. So in this way, I wouldn't necessarily say they're innovative. I would say they
this stuff will never change. This is what we call hacking, right?
Yeah, exactly. can you say that a new like disinformation narrative is innovation? Like now we have
No.
biolabs all over Ukraine and all of that stuff. Like it's just another. It's the same malicious intent in a different context or in a different wrapping. So to me, it's not as much innovation as it is just trying to find another vulnerability and another scandalous, fictitious narrative to spread that people will somehow believe.
In the beginning, we've seen. Sorry, did you have something?
No,
Okay.
just
in the beginning, we had we observed some kind of synchronization between their cyber attacks and kinetic attacks. Though later, it seems like it kind of whether they stop doing that or they can do it. Like it doesn't seem to be as coordinated as and as coherent exactly because like pre-war everyone was like oh my gosh, like whenever Russia goes full in, it's like total blackout and everything disappears. I don't know, everything is hacked and all the implants are activated. In reality, it wasn't like that. There were some successful attacks at the right time and then kind of just chaos. So do you think it's intentional or initially the synchronized attacks were just also a coincidence and they didn't have any like big plan for it? What do you think?
Or maybe they are doing more intelligence operations in order to like fuel their information ops, and this is why we do not see any effects, and it makes us feel that Russian cyber is not existing.
So there's, I think, a little bit of that. Another is if we look at how the war evolved in general, at some point they started losing commanders a lot, right? And they started scrambling for manpower and logistics. They were so logistically challenged in the conventional military warfare domains that this might have, it'll be interesting to see at which point they started to lose synchronization between different military operations and the cyber operations, and see if this correlates with chronologically, if this correlates with when they started to become more chaotic in their war. Because cyber is just one domain of warfare. So did the same chaotic approach start happening when they started to scramble for soldiers and their strategies started failing because they had to, first they thought we're going to, at least from what I'm understanding, we're going to take over Kiev. Yeah, that didn't work. So let's withdraw. Let's go back to Donetsk now. So I wonder if they had to redesign the way they conduct cyber operations as they had to change effectively the narrative of all the strategies in Ukraine. So that'll be an interesting question to answer.
Might that be that they just lost personnel who was capable to synchronize between domains? Like people serving GRU, hastily leaving the country, and people synchronizing with them on the ground in the field simply being killed by HIMARS? Might that
one
be?
option, right? But
it's just my wishful thinking.
Hypothesizing, right? No. Yep, I can understand your wishful thinking and I fully support it. It's totally an option, right? I haven't seen the data. I need to look into this more and think about it, and it's probably going to take us a few years after the war is over for us to be able to collect the data, correlate it, and have a clear answer. But I think that's a really good hypothesis. And also, just look at what's happening over the past 2 weeks. We had Prigozhin, this video of Prigozhin recruiting in Russian prisons. I don't know if you saw it, guys. Prigozhin is for anyone who doesn't know, the head of the Wagner group. They know him, right? The chef, the guy who cooks for the Wagner mercenaries. Anyway, so he was in the prison recruiting, right? So why would a guy at his caliber go into a prison and recruit? Isn't that a little bit like a waste of his time? So to me, this shows desperation. And then we had, all of us were waiting 2 nights ago to hear Putin speak, and we're like, oh my God, what will he say? And he comes on stage and says partial mobilization, which pretty much is full mobilization. And then Shoigu says 300,000 men and maybe even capable women, because also women can fall under that category, will be drafted. And then people started fleeing en masse, and we're looking at protests, and over 1,000 people have been detained in one day because they don't want to go and fight the war. So I think the Russians are having a very serious manpower problem at the moment, and this may affect so many other things. They have logistical issues, supply issues, and so on. So this is probably also affecting cyberspace and their ability to conduct operations in cyberspace.
On this note, have you noticed, I think during this time when everyone was anticipating the speech, right, one of the things that kind of caught my eye, I think they're shared.
Who was? Really? Come on, guys. Was
Well,
anyone anticipating?
no,
I was.
okay.
I was wondering
We
what
get the
say.
point.
I really was, honestly.
Yeah,
I didn't sleep
exactly.
that night.
Oh,
Exactly. We didn't anticipate to be impressed. We were just anticipating what happens next.
Yeah,
You know, Swan, he has one leg.
Just,
Yeah, exactly.
sorry, I interrupted. But just getting back to Prigozhin, can we spend a little more time on him? So I saw this video and some other one, and it struck me that he is not acting as Putin's chef. He is not recruiting to go to war for Putin. He is recruiting to go to war for Russia, right? So basically acting as a person, as an agent, and is a political agent of himself, right? That maybe again just my wishful thinking and another sign of distortion of political elites in Russia at the moment. But could it be that
As an independent warlord, so to speak?
Yeah. Because Russia after Putin doesn't have any integrated way to transfer power legitimately, simply because they have destroyed their democracy. There is no
that's not part of their
to
plan.
do that, right? So basically, Putin doesn't plan to die, and he doesn't care what happens next, right? And that would be very interesting. Kadyrovцы against Wagner, against Siloviki, against FSB, against the army.
Yeah, it's interesting how Kadyrov also pops up from time to time in comments, right? Yeah, that is very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't dare speculate on who's going to be next, honestly. I've been asked this many times, and I'm thinking, sure, FSB, someone from the inner circle, Medvedev resurrected. Like, there are so many options, but there's so much we don't know that I don't dare speculate because I really don't have a clear answer given the factors that and the information that we know. But that's a very interesting point.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's something to be said about...
But that's the greatest answer we could get, Bilyana. There is no certain candidate.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you're right. Which is scary, isn't it? It's scary because
It is.
To a certain extent, it's good to know who's in power because we have studied his mindset for 20 years. Like, sure, we still don't know a lot about the guy, but we know about his history, the way he thinks. We've seen him act when he's challenged. We see how he responds to missile defense, eastern expansion of NATO, different people in office in the US. Like, we can, to a certain extent, we can predict his behavior. Mm-hmm. While with a new guy, then we have to do all of this again. So there's something to be said about the certainty of having a villain in charge that you're familiar with as much as you can be. But on Prigozhin and his behavior, I would say it's I would link that to the narratives that they have right now and why they're going in Ukraine. And recently, I don't know if you picked up on that, there was a new humanitarian policy doctrine, or Russia's humanitarian policy abroad doctrine, which was a really interesting document, about 30 pages. Putin signed it 2 or 3 weeks ago. And to me, it relates to information warfare. I don't think in the document they mention information warfare, but it relates to it because they say, we will protect ethnic Russians abroad, and it's our right to do that, and we'll do that because they are part of our cultural heritage and so on. So it's almost like a roadmap for, hey, these are the countries we can invade next if they mess with our ethnic population, or mess in a way that we say that they mess, if they threaten our ethnic Russians abroad. So I think the narrative right now is that Mother Russia is defending its the diasporas abroad, its people abroad. So this may be one of the reasons why he's recruiting in this way, because in their patriotic education also that they have been building and investing in institutionally for years, that's a whole other talk we can have about youth movements and paramilitary groups and so on. They tend to go with that idea of patriotism, of we were great during the Cold War, we were great, we liberated Europe from Nazi Germany, and this is the narrative that they're trying to rally people behind.
But that's so reason. that's so stupid historically, because they basically follow the manual written by Nazis.
Yeah, you're not going to face
That's
opposition
what they
from me on
did.
that. Yeah, I know.
I
really,
guess
I know it's
that
absurd.
there average.
average
Sorry, I
Russian
was
just
going to say
doesn't know
that every
history.
citizen probably doesn't look into that.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
Basically, the observation I wanted to mention was that supposedly, because there's no way for me to verify 100%, but during this time that we are anticipating Putin's speech, Russian Air Force is supposed to be like the command center in case of nuclear exchange was in there, and similarly British Royal Force, that's kind of similarly designed. Basically, they were both in the air, and then after a while, when like everyone realized like, okay, the speech is canceled, one lands, and then the British one lands. Do you think this also could be just part of a kind of informational just influence or whatever, or like to keep everyone like scared or whatnot?
Yeah, probably.
Oh, I have a very trivial explanation for that, because what army, like military analysts in the West, are articulating about what's actually been happening for all this time, like these 12 hours or something, that he had three options and he had to choose. One option was to withdraw. One option was to escalate unconventionally. And the third option was partial or general mobilization. So he have chosen the third one. But the options were prepared.
Cold War vibes.
Yeah.
So in future, after... Yeah, sorry, you had something on this note?
Yeah, we do have questions from audience, 2 questions. Yeah, whenever there is a pause. Or Ruslan, if you want to resume the topic.
No, actually, let's go with the questions and then we'll switch just to another.
Yeah, so I think like it's one is, slightly related to what we discussed. So Roman is asking, have you observed other countries adopting Russian information warfare, and how far is China into it, especially in the information part?
A little bit, yes. Do you guys want me to answer, or did you want to weigh in? Glad you. So
No. Please go in.
So I've looked into that. I'm not an expert on Chinese foreign policy. I don't speak Mandarin. That's the next language I want to learn, actually. But they have a doctrine of free warfare, I think, and cognitive warfare is a part of that free warfare doctrine. I think it was like legal, cognitive, and something else. So they're building a doctrine that looks similar to the Russian one. But from what I have seen, and there were some really good studies published about a year or two ago by an Australian think tank that looked at where the Chinese government is using cyber operations and activities similar to what the Russians are doing that we call information warfare. And it was really interesting to see the geographic divide. Like the Russians are targeting more Europe and the United States, while the Chinese are targeting countries that are more strategically important to them in Asia, like Taiwan, Hong Kong, and so on. So that's where they're conducting those operations. So they're definitely learning. I think they're learning from each other. There was a really good student at RAND who wanted to actually cover this, and I was excited. I thought I was really hoping he'll go in that direction, and I'll work with him on his dissertation, but he decided to pick a different route. But that's still a topic that I hope someone picks up, because it's a challenging topic, and I would love to know who is learning from who and how, because I think there is some learning happening. And you have the Chinese, and also recently, and this was also before the previous elections in the US, we have our IC, or the intelligence community, say to beware of the Russians, the Chinese, and the Iranians, that they may try to conduct information operations, is what US calls it, against the elections. But to me, it's a little bit myopic, because yes, they're challenging the elections, but by definition, doctrine stipulates that they are using just the vulnerabilities and the opportunity to divide us and erode our belief in democracy around the elections, but then the particular information operation can continue. So don't think of it as episodic. Okay, they're going to attack us because of the elections. They will attack us because of the elections, and they will continue to try to divide us afterwards and use the grievances that already exist around the election process to erode our democratic processes further. So I would say those three probably are top of my list. And you have domestic issues in different countries as well. So I would say, in a way, dictator or authoritarian regimes have definitely learned from Russia's playbook and are applying this domestically too.
Is there another one, Alex?
Yeah, so the second question is, about awareness. So how the awareness of being informationally attacked has changed in the Western society, both US and Europe, for different social classes. Yeah.
That's a great question. I mean, I have partial information from the people that I socialize with and the studies that I read about this. So I think we're more aware of what the Russian government can be doing and what the different elements of information warfare are. But this is among scholars, the media, the stakeholders that are involved. When it comes to the general population, the fact that we still have narratives that pick up and people believe them, like disinformation, like for example flat earthers, like who believes in this? Why would you even think that this is a thing? Why would you get to the point where you have conferences in Texas for flat earthers that believe that the earth is flat? Like, what kind of thinking do you have to believe that that's true? So for me, the biggest problem is, how do we educate our population to be skeptical consumers of information and recognize fake narratives versus real narratives? Or people that believe that COVID didn't happen and that the government just kept us at home because they wanted to ruin the economy. Those are ridiculous narratives that I've heard from my Russian friends here in Santa Monica. I am in California. So those for me are, we have to educate our population to be smarter. And this is, I think, a problem in different countries. I would say countries that have done it well, and I cover this in my book, and I'm fascinated by this case, guys. I don't know if you're paying attention, but Norway. Do you know that in Norway, the Russians tried to they created for a few months Sputnik Norge? I'm not sure how we pronounce it, but Norge is the spelling. Basically, a Norwegian version of Sputnik, their propaganda machine, and it crashed and burned. It didn't pick up. They had it for a few months, and the Norwegians just weren't reading it. So they just closed it down. So why are the Norwegians smarter than us in recognizing what's reputable news source and what isn't? Like, that's what I want to understand. I think that's the type of shield we need to build and resilience we have to build.
I know that's not the best way to prove a point, but from my personal experience, maybe you just need to live long enough to come to several conclusions that something that you truly believed in is incorrect. And then it starts happening too often. You are trying to investigate what is the reason for that happening, right? And it seems to me, I'm not sure that it's correct in all the cases, but it seems to me that very often I concluded that it's at some point in my personal history, someone I trusted told me so, and I didn't verify, right? And this knowledge was with me for a very long time, like, I don't know, for 30 years. And then suddenly I meet another person and I communicate, we have a conversation, and then they just convince me and prove that I was wrong for all this time. So maybe the correct solution, I do not believe in a practical way to give someone a vaccine for critical thinking and just magically make them skeptical about disinformation. But I think that maybe we should focus on a narrower population of opinion dealers and thought leaders, on all these people who are followed online or otherwise, and just make up some rules for them, and that would suffice.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. Yeah, studies have, yeah, exactly. Influence
Does it scale
influencers in
like
a way.
that?
Yeah, because we follow influencers, right? We follow leaders. We read certain sources, and exactly, if you look at the people that believe in certain disinformation narratives, like let's say certain diasporas, they watch the same media channels. They go to the same social media groups. There are echo chambers that are created. So you're absolutely right that there are certain groups that we can target more than others. And the idea about the persuasion, it's a great idea. I don't know how effective it would be. There are so many biases about you believing a piece of information when you hear it first. Like, it sticks with you more than if you first hear the truth and then someone tells you the fake news. So there's this advantage of hearing something first. There's the information you feel like you're barraged with a volume of information from different sources that you trust, and those sources that you trust send you this fake information, you will believe it because you believe the sources. Like, there's research behind that stuff. So it's complicated. I'm not sure one conversation will solve it, or how many conversations you have to have with a person that believes a particular fake narrative to get them to the point to realize that it's fake. But that's the point of targeting the influencers is a great one, and it's been proven that that's one of the ways to do it. Yeah.
Also, like from my observation, it's unfortunately it's not necessarily the smartness, because the person can be smart by every
No way.
objective
Yeah,
measure and have
unfortunately,
degrees and
yes.
whatnot, and still possess like very deeply flawed arguments.
Yes. The number of times I have sat next to really influential people in huge homes here with ocean views telling me that COVID is not real. It's scary.
Yeah, so like it would be simpler if it was just the matter of education, like just get everyone quality education and the problem is solved. But I'm not sure it would be.
Or you could be a taxi driver in Kiev for the same effect.
Yes, exactly.
It's the most popular conversation I have with them.
Oh my! I've had a lot of interesting conversations with taxi drivers in Russia, and some of them are smart. So I have had both both extremes, to be honest, on that front. Yeah, you're right. But,
So,
but Ruslan, that's what I wanted to say. Like, what is high quality education? To me, it's teach critical thinking. Like, let people write essays, ask them to speak up during classes. I don't know how you guys grew up, but in Bulgaria, because our system was still communist when I was studying, until the end of high school, until I went abroad, we had no political education, no civil or civic education, studies that Americans have, where they talk about what is democracy, why democracy is valuable, how do you compare that with communism. Like, I was taught to memorize facts and report facts back. I wasn't taught to think. And only when I went to Germany for the first time in my bachelor's, and I failed a class in political science because basically I wrote a paper about why communism is good, and my professor asked me to go into his room in his office, and we talked for 2 hours, and he convinced me that democracy is better. And then I worked for him for 3 years, so I became an expert on actually measurements of democracy.
well, see, so that's exactly what Vlad was talking about, right? You were proven wrong essentially, and got
But what was that? If you were not taught to think critically, if you didn't have the methodology basis for that, on what grounds did he convince you? What is it? Is it maybe genetics? No, really.
But what have we learned? That communism was stable. Everyone is receiving the same salary. You don't have homeless in the streets. You don't have crime because everyone is taken care of, but everyone also is equally treated. This is how Bulgarians understood the value of communism: stability.
Mm-hmm.
And then I wrote about that. And I think my case study was on Ecuador or another country. And then he started telling me, okay, how about when you want to express your opinion? What happens if you're in a communist state? How about if you actually are smarter and you want to earn more? So we went through actually logical steps. I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. Maybe I don't want to live in a communalka with 10 other people in the same apartment. And maybe, I do want to have a nicer house and drive a Lamborghini one day. Like, why should that be only the politician that runs my country? So those are the types of questions that he asked me, and it took about 2 hours. And then he asked me if I wanted to work for him, and I said yes. So for 3 years, that was my job. Matthias Bogarts, you can Google him. I think he's still a professor at Jakobs University in Germany. Good guy.
You don't even need to ask provocative questions. Yeah, in communistic, my great grandfather actually went to prison for promoting for accessible education. They were going to do like paid education because universities didn't have enough funding, and that's what he got in prison for. So you don't even need to say something against the party directly to. Just as long as they see you as a potential threat to their ideology, it's all done. But basically, your unit has geostrategic in its name, so that suggests that it kind of thinks long term. And so, in the future, after Ukrainian victory, how do you think Russian information warfare will change, and how will it look like?
Great question. I like the statement, the way it was put. I think.
Me too. I expect there be no more Russian disinformation. Frankly speaking.
I think the machine is there, and I think so. If we look at the way the Russians have been using information warfare, so they started in 2007. We have the Estonia case, and then a lot of the cases happened after 2014. And what happened in 2014? The annexation of Crimea happened. And then now we have a whole war with the West very clearly supporting Ukraine with sanctions, with just unprecedented unity among NATO member states for Ukraine. So I think now we've really gotten on Russia's bad side. And I don't see a lot of reasons for them to not use all of the tools that are available to them to demonstrate that our democratic process is inferior to them and it's not working, and it's basically what they're trying to achieve for disinformation to discredit us. So at this point, I think information warfare will probably see a lot of it towards the West, because I just don't see a reason for the Russians to hold back anymore, especially if they want to exact revenge after Ukraine. So I'm thinking, this is just my hypothesis, but the way I see it, if it's a method for them to create to win in the information space, to actually exact a victory, to exact revenge, to get a win out of us, I would say that probably it's going to get worse and we'll see more attacks. But I think there's a lot to be said about capacity and limitation. And right now, I think the Russians have their different priorities, which are stabilize internally the country, make sure we don't collapse because of the mobilization, get our guys back, close the airports. I don't know if you guys followed, but yesterday, basically the Russians said, like, men can't flee the country, you got to go fight. So I think internally they have to stabilize, they have to create some sort of a perceived win in Ukraine, or decide to withdraw, which I don't think, I doubt Putin is going to withdraw. I think it's going to
they
be
can't
for
withdraw
a while.
Yeah. Afghanistan is too fresh in his memory.
Oh, you think? That's a good parallel actually to draw.
Okay, so look, you were putting it in a very coherent formula. So what do you think maybe? Oh no, I will not ask that. Sorry. So Ruslan, please go ahead.
Okay. So
no, it's too dark.
Okay.
We are family friendly. We are family friendly.
One of the conclusions you draw in the book is that proximity to Russia matters when it comes to influence, or rather, like being targeted by their cyber operations, and that the operations are more aggressive near the border, for example, like targeting Estonia. What do you think are the reasons? Because you would think that cyber is something where proximity shouldn't matter.
I think it's because that's a great point, right? Because it doesn't respect borders, and you can hack a target-rich environment. It's something in the United States, you don't have to just hack Estonia next door, right? I would say it seems to me that cyber operations are an extension of foreign policy for Russia. It's culturally and historically for them acceptable to be more aggressive in the Eastern Bloc, or basically the communist states, because they had more influence over them historically. So this is the argument, or at least the hypothesis that I'm drawing, because they're more aggressive in cyberspace in Bulgaria, Montenegro, Estonia, the cases that I looked at that are closer to Russia. They use DDoS attacks. They actually attack core election infrastructure. But also in those cases in Montenegro, they tried to stage a coup. They tried to kill the prime minister. Do you see them trying to do that in the States? I mean, yes, January the 6th happened, but at this point, there's no Russian relation or significant influence on that particular failed coup. But in Montenegro, they actually sponsored the jury officers, several jury officers went to Serbia and Montenegro and staged and basically financed the group to go and buy weapons and storm the parliament building and kill the prime minister. So there they even resorted to that. In Bulgaria, they tried to poison a weapons dealer twice and failed. And it's proven that they were GRU units, because after the Skripal case, we realized some of the same guys using the same tactics were there. They most likely staged explosions in weapons factories in Bulgaria. One of the people that was killed during that explosion, I believe, was an American. So that's the level of like the aggression that they will reach, that the brazen behavior is definitely more unrestrained in Eastern Europe and countries closer, and so are the cyber operations in comparison to Western, to their behavior in the West.
So it's a little bit like they pull their kind of old traditional framework and vision on cyber, so essentially limiting themselves in a way.
Exactly. It's almost like back to the question, do they innovate? I mean, maybe on the periphery they innovate, but if you look at the structure, like, and apply to the Cold War behavior, it's kind of, it follows, it's almost like
It's
new wine in
analogous.
old bottles, something like that. Yeah, we'll come up with a better analogy, but something along the lines of, yeah, it's the same old behavior.
And now I don't think that what I was going to ask was too dark, but I won't anyway. Okay, so
now I'm really curious, Vlad. Okay.
Oh, I was just thinking to myself. I wanted to ask you about on the terms of back to the topic of proximity and information effect without all these covert operations, Novichok stuff, and all these scary things they do. What do you think about propaganda versus disinformation? Like, in my, maybe that's wrong, but in my historical understanding of how the Cold War was won, I believe that the significant part of success was because of radio was still the most popular medium in the Soviet Union, and Radio Freedom, Radio Free Europe, all these propaganda outlets that basically just shouted carefully constructed true messages to the Soviet and Warsaw Pact countries' population. It very much contributed to the overall success, right? Now we have cyberspace as the most popular medium for information transfer. So basically what they do, they just continue to do bad type of propaganda, disinformation in cyberspace, right? All over the world, because proximity doesn't matter anymore. Why don't we, first question, why don't the Western world, the civilized democratic world functioning as liberal democracies, just tune up this message of truth and just deliver it more diversely, maybe, right? Or are they doing so and I just do not follow, right? And the second one is, must we really fall back to their methods and maybe try something they do? As we observed lately, I didn't delve into the topic, but I believe that some first case of pro-Western propaganda operation was taking place in the media. Is it true? Because I only just maybe skimmed through the Twitter and it caught my attention.
Well, let me start. All a great question. So let me, if I miss answering any of them, just let me know. So on the general thing about how they use radio before and whether we're doing the same, but we have our own media, right? And we continue to allow free speech, and that's how we're doing it. We still have those
media exactly
platforms. We're
but,
still
but,
spreading.
But we focus on our own audience.
Yeah. Well, I don't think we're focused on the wrong audience. I think we're also reaching the right audience, and we have so many centers for disinformation now and fact-checking organizations that have spurred organically or a part of an institution. So I think we're doing a great job. We're a little uncoordinated, but honestly, I don't know how to do this better at this point. I think the lack of coordination is actually good. The fact that we have a mix of organically grown organizations that are dealing with disinformation, and some of them are related to a media agency, some of them are voluntary groups, and you have that as a mix with institutions like the European Union, the United States, like having their own departments that are looking at disinformation and publishing information about some of the most prevalent disinformation narratives and so on. I think the fact that we have a mix of this is good. I think that we should stay in that space and not coordinate it. I think that's the way to go, because this is how you reach different audiences. Because, some people are distrustful of the government. They don't want to hear the government telling them that this is a disinformation.
Yeah.
But they're going to go on
that sounds fair.
They're going to say, yeah, but then one of the influencers that we talked about earlier that you mentioned, it's a great point. Okay, I'm going to go to the influencer. Okay, he tells me that this is disinformation. Okay, I'll believe him because I like that source. And this is the source that I listen to. So I think the mix is good. What was your other question about
about whether we have to fall down to their level and maybe use some disinformation just in return?
Well, the way you put it, fall down to their level, I would say no, right? Who wants to fall down? But there's something to be said about, I honestly don't know where I stand on this at this point, and I think you may be referring to the recent disclosure that the U.S. government may have been conducting their own psyops
exactly
through accounts that they didn't disclose were related to or were associated with the U.S. government or the military. There's something to be said about ceding an entire warfare domain to an adversary by just saying, okay, we're going to keep our moral ground and not stoop to your level, not come to your level, and we're just going to continue to spread our narratives through legitimate channels, through accounts that we clearly link to ourselves that are not fake and so on. I don't know. I think there are a lot of ethical considerations there. Like in cases where you have to track down a terrorist or an extremist group, I would say that probably it's justified to use whatever methods necessary to achieve that mission. About general disinformation narratives, I don't think we should probably be spreading disinformation, but I'm still thinking about what my position is on this. I think we need more study and we need to understand what are the different scenarios where this is allowed and this isn't, and we need to put it in doctrine and be very clear about what we are doing.
That's really cool that you put it in these terms, because once you pronounced that we shouldn't concede the whole entirety of a domain of military operation, I thought that maybe you could answer this question if I put another argument in. So if it does not surpass the threshold of military action, maybe the approach must be more moral, keeping the moral higher ground. But if it does, if it's already a war, then all the means are okay.
I don't know.
But that's again, I'm thinking
it's so theoretical. Yeah, that could be, but
in Ukraine it's not theoretical.
Yeah, no, you're right. But it's just I meant to say it's still like there's a lot of abstraction, and there's so many different cases to include in this. So yeah, I don't know. NAVO, for example, like you guys put that in in my mind. Like this is awesome. I mean, I don't think we should laugh at war, but then I look at the memes and I'm like, oh my God, it keeps it in my mind. I look at them, I follow them. Like it is such an innovative way of effectively drawing attention to a huge strategy that's happening in Europe right now. It's a way to attract the international community, and especially people that are not in Ukraine and feel like this is alien, and you relate to them through humor. It's awesome. It's very innovative. It makes me feel very uncomfortable. And I'm sorry, I don't really have a sense of humor, so I can't really join the troops, but I at least can support through reading. So in that respect, like, is this disinformation? If you're being sarcastic and humorous and like, where do you put that on the scale? Like, I still don't know how exactly I don't know how to define that. I think it will take us a while to figure out.
It's a great way to turn this around.
Yeah, but it's like, it is a element of the way you're fighting bad guys. This is through your networks, through humor. That's actually now I would say a tool of warfare. But I don't know exactly where to put it. Is it still within the information warfare domain? Yes. But is it disinformation? No. Maybe strategic messaging. I keep on using that term because to me strategic messaging is strategic communication towards a particular targeted population, and it could include disinformation, but it doesn't have to just be disinformation. It could be true information that you're just channeling towards a particular audience because you want to achieve a particular objective.
Right, but then also if it's something that kind of organically appeared like NAFO without like any state like doing that, is it strategic messaging? Like how can it be strategic in that case, right?
Exactly. Well, because exactly, but you still have an element of organization, right? And you now have the charter there as well, and people are relating to each other, and it's a network that has a certain element of coordination. So in that way, I would say it is strategic, and you know who your target is, and you know you know the goal and the objective. So in this way, because it's not chaotic, there is an objective, and the international community is behind it in a certain way, or the people that are involved, I would say in this way it's strategic. That's why I would call it strategic.
Got it. It's I don't think we'll ever get a like clear line here, because essentially like pluralism and having different opinions, and then having someone injecting like intentionally incorrect opinions like as part of propaganda, like it's not easily solvable unless you have just one right opinion, right? And we know that that has some negatives to this as well. So we'll just have to somehow deal with it. And
still, it's possible. It's possible if you all think the same, like me.
Right. So
scary.
basically, we're at this. Well, exactly,
because
but that's how
the
dictators
perspective
think.
of each and every one of us. Because unless we are formally educated to be pluralistic in our thinking, in talking to ourselves, right, in our mind, concerning important topics, we all treat everyone the same. If you only viewed the world the same way as a perfect human being that I am, right?
Wow.
To those of us who are still, to those who are still with us, right? I want to remind that we're at this part of conversation where we're talking about like fighting disinformation and how countries can fight back. But I think we could easily spend another hour discussing just that. So I just wanted to ask Bilyana, maybe you want to talk about your research for this? Yeah, let.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so as far as we know, right, you had a multi-year project where you basically try to use artificial intelligence to detect Russian trolls. So do you want to tell a little bit about that research and how do you see this can be used?
Oh yeah, so this was a while back. I think we did this. We did this with a few of my colleagues back at RAND, and it was a really cool project. We wanted to figure out how do we apply AI machine learning tools, specifically analyzing content, on to detect trolls on Twitter and Reddit and different social platforms. And we used a particular model of natural language processing. Basically, you know, when a Russian speaks in English, they make certain mistakes, and they're kind of common across different Russians, like across Russians, like use longer sentences, you use certain words differently, you forget to use is because you don't really use it in Russian language.
Everyone is smiling because the guys are seeing themselves, me included, in what you say.
But pretty much, so maybe our model will catch you guys, so don't troll us because we'll detect you. So basically, we looked at those linguistic characteristics of Russians that pretend to be Americans because they make the same mistakes. And we build a model based on the mistakes that they make, and then we applied it to some Twitter data and some Reddit data, and we got almost perfect scoring, or almost perfectly managed to detect who is a fake American, basically a Russian troll tweeting, and who's actually an American tweeting. So
who is a cheap fake American who didn't spend $50 a year for Grammarly? Because this stuff does just about that. Right?
Well, but then also there is another trade for you. So I used to work at a fintech company, and of course there were some fraud cases, and we were looking at a transcript of a chat of someone with our support agent who essentially turned out to be an agent that tried to kind of do social engineering and whatnot. And in just among all the messages, in one place there was like unclear combination of English letters, non-English letters, right? And I realized that, again, to American it might not make sense, but to me it clearly was seen that the person was trying to answer yes, but they had Cyrillic layout on, so
yeah,
so smart. Look at that.
They kind of expose themselves with that.
So these NLP models, they basically catch a troll based on some corpus of data, right? So how much text do you need to observe? Is Twitter enough?
Oh, that was a great question. We use the training, so the test and train. We trained our module using the data from 2016, and we managed to adjust that for later. And how many we scaled it down. I have to open the paper. We literally wrote one blog post. It was 800 words, and I can't tell you that answer, but there was a response, most likely from a nation state, as a result of the fact that we wrote a 800-word blog on a website. So it was something that they basically paid attention to, is what I'm trying to tell you guys.
Yeah, that's cool.
But yeah, we scaled it down. I think we got to like 6,000 entries you needed to have or something like this. I can check. Don't quote me. It's literally in the paper. It's like a blog post that we still have. It was
okay, so that's not like
catching trolls on Twitter or something like that. But we did check that.
Fantastic amounts of data. That's quite natural.
Exactly.
You can observe it online. If a person is active, you just can observe it, and that's it.
Exactly. But Vlad,
Nice.
the bad thing about this is, thank you. So it worked, but we know that the Russians are using also troll farms abroad now. So unfortunately, you may catch some of the trolls that are basically Russians pretending to be Americans, but if they're Macedonians pretending to be Americans or someone from an African country, then you have to create a different model because their mistakes based on their native language will be different.
Considering the Russian ruble exchange rate, that's outsourcing that stuff may become irrelevant very soon. Just not on their agenda.
Yeah,
but
it's a possibility.
About the culture of troll farms, given what you have on your plate right now, did you have a chance to see Undeclared War?
Undeclared
it's
War,
a series.
Oh, I haven't.
It's a TV series produced in the UK, I guess, because of the accents and Simon Pegg starring. So it's about GCHQ versus FSB, cyber war, and information warfare. So I have very good feedback from people close to the culture on the one side of it, right? And you are the perfect person to ask your opinion, what you think about what's the internal culture of FSB trolling farms could be. And is it depicted in a cultural product more or less close to reality?
Yeah, well, I have to watch it first, right? I'll put it on my list.
Yeah,
Usually the shows that I watch are Russian shows. I can recommend you a few. Like IT Rota, I don't know if you've seen it. It's about how the Russians are recruiting their hacker teams, and it's pretty good. It was basically approved by the Ministry of Defense and a few others. So that's how I spend my evenings, watching Russian propaganda shows. but they're good. They're good. No, that's how I get my depictions of popular culture and hackers in popular culture.
This one I generally recommend because I like watched it on putting it on pause regularly just to see whether what they show on screens is more or less like realistic, and it is. It's like, you know, Mr. Robot first season of Mr. Robot to pen testing. This stuff could be to information warfare.
That's awesome.
Just to explain your non-technical friend what it is, you just give them a season of a series and they are in, like, conceptually.
Absolutely. I would love to see it. I'll have a look. With regards to the troll farms and what they're like inside, like we had some information from the 2016 investigations and indictments, right? And then afterwards the reports, like that they were literally paid like from 9 to 5. Like the trolls had they almost were like not normal staff members of a company, like employees. They have a 9 to 5 job, and they were paid by the number of tweets or engagements that they had, and they were given the types of narratives that they had to proliferate on social media. So it's almost like your job is to troll. Your job is to be a whatever they call it, like a PR agent or whatever the nice term they want to put around it. But it was like a regular day job. That's how it was described, at least. That's the impression that I got from the reading that I did. I haven't gone into one. I would love to break into one of those. I wouldn't mind seeing it firsthand, but I haven't. That's the knowledge that I have.
I was just thinking, what a terrible kind of professional cost to have to watch Russian propaganda in the evenings. But
yeah,
it's hilarious to me.
A lot of liability. Just for your information, I already got my answer. It's very close to what they depict, but you still go see the movie, see the series.
Awesome.
I'm sure you will enjoy it.
All right.
Basically, I feel like we could go on for another hour for sure, and we just want to be mindful of your time. So in the end, we typically ask if you have anything for Ukrainian audience, or if you want to cover any other topic for sure as well.
I mean, talking to you guys is great, and I can also go for other hours, but I also have a day job to do, unfortunately. So I will have to go. I feel completely unqualified to tell Ukrainians anything at the moment. This is an active war that you're in, guys, and I can't imagine what this is like. And everyone I have met so far from Ukraine, Victor Zhora, I want to just applaud him and the people that are representing you outside of your country, because they are doing a fantastic job of maintaining, like, being sane and accurately telling us about what's happening on the ground. And I'm just absolutely in awe of you. The fact that you're so, like, your fierce defiance in the middle of what's happening is just awe-inspiring to me. And I just want to say thank you.
Thank you so much. We also want to thank you, everyone who tremendously supports Ukraine abroad with their work, with their with everything that they do. Because again, we couldn't have done anything like that without the support, realistically. So thanks everyone a lot. At this time, we also want to remind everyone who's listening that we do encourage everyone to support Ukraine with any way possible, whether it's working with your representatives locally or donating to our trusted fund, Come Back Alive, a fund for competence help to Ukrainian army, because they know best what are the largest gaps that need to be covered. So that's why we trust them and prefer to work with them. If anything just reached to your nearest Ukrainian, I'm sure they will tell you a lot more about a lot more ways to help. And thank you, Bilyana, for all your work and also for joining us today. And let's wait for the victory. Thank you so much.
Anytime. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.